G'day guys, Matt from TackleWest. We've had a really good response from our previous Bream series we did on our YouTube channel. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. So today we thought we'd bring you a whole new video, really specific about right now, what's happening right now in the river, what to use, where to go and how to do it. So I thought we'd start off with some lures for the morning. So at the moment the tides are really low in the river at the morning. There's not much water, there's quite big easterly blowing, and it can be a little bit tough. So you want to be targeting deeper water areas. To find those, jump on Google Maps, look on the maps there, you can see all the jetties and the rock walls, all these places you can fish. So some really good lures to target them. First up is the micro mussel. So these are fantastic around structure, and that's typically where you're going to find the deep water at the moment in the mornings, around bridge pylons, jetties, rock walls, all that kind of thing. If you're land-based, otherwise in the boat you can hit the deep snags as well. But these are fantastic thrown up against the structure. We've shown you these before. You throw them right up against the structure and just let them waft down, and they usually get eaten on the sink. With the low tide, the fish will likely be sitting on the bottom, so it's a good idea to make sure it sinks all the way to the bottom and even let it sit there for a little bit. You can give it some hops, work it back, and keep working through your structure that you're fishing. These come in a few different colors. There's a blue, pink, white, and then the black. Doesn't really matter. It's good to show the fish something different now and again. But yeah, these, I like them in the heavy, especially fishing deeper. You can go the light if the current isn't moving too much. It's up to you. It's good to have a bit of a range in the box. The next lure is a favourite of mine, and I've started using it a lot more recently, and it's the Infeet Spike 44s. The 44 profile is really good. It just seems to be that right size. The 53s are great for trying to find big fish, but if you just want to catch fish and still get big ones as well, the 44 is a really good profile. It dives nice and deep. There's an MR, which dives to about 1.5 meters. There's also an EXDR, which gets down to, depending on how you use it, 2.5 up to supposedly 4 meters. Cha-ching. But you can pick your depth depending on how deep your bank is. And you just cast these out. You can work them again on structure, along deep sandy drop-offs is where I like to run them, and find the contour and get it to just dig through the sand and get that bib right down in the sand, puffing up dirt. You can really rip the rod tip, pause it, let it sit there, and it'll just slowly rise up. Really good lure. Some great colors. I like this Suji, the brown Suji. It's a really nice prawn imitation. This time of year you do get a few prawns around, and it really stands out. It's got some nice UV highlights in it as well, but really any color, just get out there, it'll work. And lastly, it's a good old-fashioned Cranka Crab. The lure that sort of changed the way we fished in the Bream scene. These things are so versatile, but again, for this sort of fishing I like to target the structure, sandy drop-offs. It's fished really on the sink. You get it tight to structure, just like with the mussel, and let it float down. Those legs on there, those legs and those claws will just sort of wave in the current as it goes down, claws up in attack mode. And once it sits on the bottom, you just let it sit there, and those claws will wave around any sort of current, and the Bream just peck at them. You almost feel a little bit of pressure through the line. It's like they've pinned it to the bottom and they're scratching on the top of it, and that's usually fish. They're trying to just pin it to the bottom and try and crack that shell. Same thing with that mussel as well. These come in a lot of great colours. I like the UV, the olive, the black, but there's a bunch of different colours. They're really popular. 2 weights as well. There's a light and a heavy. Usually you go as light as you can get away with. If you're fishing a bit more into that mid-morning and the tide's starting to run a bit more, maybe the heavy, but if you're on there when the tide's not really moving, it's a slack water, that light's the way to go. Really get natural presentations of those fish. Now, if we move into the evening, or the late afternoon, that tide has been coming in all day and it's starting to fill up the flats and the edges, which is where all the bait's going to be getting pushed into, and then obviously the fish are going to follow. So I've got a couple of lures here which I really like. One I've been using a lot recently as well, and down south, and I've been catching a lot of good fish on, is these Riggies. The 505, the red, Carmen red, Spanish red, whatever you want to call it over the years. It's a proven catcher day and night. Now the good thing about these evening tides is, especially this 505, is you can fish into the night. It's a really popular colour when the sun goes down as well. It catches really nice light during the day too. It gives a really good silhouette, good profile. It just seems to work, and as a reason it's really popular. So they're a shallow 56mm jerkbait. So it's suspending as well. So in that brackish water it will suspend. Depending on the hooks you have and how salty the water is, you might get a slight sink or a slight rise, but generally suspending. Comes with good hooks out of the box. They cast really well. They have that mag drive system in there, so the weight slides to the back, and as soon as you grip that rod tip, it snaps to the front and gives you a really nice, predictable action, so you know your lure's always swimming correctly. They only get down, depending where you work your rod tips, sort of 0.2 to like 0.8. You can jerk bait them, you can slow roll them, you can do whatever you want with them really, and they catch fish, especially if you're fishing land-based. You can get that rod tip up, getting up over the weed. I did that down south recently and caught a heap of fish on them. Next is one that has been super popular in the shop. We've just been restocked in them, and that's the SPM55. So it's a 55mm stick bait, 3.2 grams. Cast really nicely, but the good thing about these is, yes, it's 55mm, but it's quite a slim profile, so it's not overly big presenting to the fish, especially if they're a little bit finicky. Cast really nice in the flats, have that shimmy action on the sink, and then that just slow slight slalom, that S as you retrieve it with a straight rod tip, and you can actually really get them dancing and twitching. If you just have those real subtle rod tip shakes or twitches, you can get them dancing, looking like a wounded bait fish with that nice slow sink. You can get them right up into reed edges and shallow areas, and as long as you're quick on that bail arm getting flicked over, you can keep them out of the gunk on the bottom and get into those zones where the fish will push up, because when that tide gets up, the bait gets right under those edges sometimes, and the fish follow them. The fish will be in this much water with their backs out the water sometimes, so yeah, really good option. You can actually also fish it deep as well. I should mention that, because these are a sinking lure, you can actually fish to whatever depth you really want to, and in areas like, let's say if you're land-based Harrison Island, you can cast these out and you've got 2 meters of water and you can let it sink and twitch it down there as well, so quite a versatile lure. And then lastly, one that I do use a lot in summertime, especially on the flats, when there's a bit of water through them, especially as well when there's a bit of wind, is the crankbaits. This is the Pro Lure S36, the shallow. It's in the combat color, it's a UV. I was using this one again recently down south, got a cracker of a fish on it. They cast beautifully, they have a really good predictable action, they always swim perfectly, and they come with decoy hooks as well, which is nice, because I usually change all mine to YS25s. They're out of the box, ready to go, cast like bullets, and all you gotta do is wind it back. You can twitch and pause them, but I find with these cranks, it's more of a prospecting lure. You're just looking to find pockets of fish out on the flats that you're fishing, so I'll just cast in a fan pattern and just wind it back. Just a dead slow wind. You can speed it up, slow it down, but just keep it moving. You can throw pauses in, but usually just keep it moving. You just feel tap, 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 and then clunk, and you find the fish, and you can really work them over. Really good lure for that kind of fishing on the flats. So that's sort of my 6 that I'm going to at the moment in summertime when the fish are active. They're on the flats, or in the morning when it's a bit shallower. They've been really successful to me. But next we're going to bring you over to the plastics. Well, we've just had the brand new Bait Junkie jig heads come in, and we've got a bunch of their plastics, and we're going to show you how to wriggle those up. So we'll head over this way. So the 3 most popular ones for the Bream, we've got the 2.5-inch grub, 2.5-inch minnow, and the 3-inch risky critter. They're made from a really stretchy, I think they call it Elastomax material, and it's got the amino built in. They're just really good plastics, really durable, and have a great action. Similar in that to the Z-Man, but just probably a little bit softer, a little bit squishier, a little bit more finesse, which this time of year can be good, especially when the water can be a bit still with those really hot summer days and not much wind. So with these, you can actually cut them all down as well, which is a bit of a unique feature of the Bait Junkie. So on the front, which we'll show you, we'll get a cutaway of it, there's a little Daiwa D. It's a little logo that's imprinted on the side, and you actually chop it just behind there, and it basically turns it into a 2-inch grub or 2-inch paddle tail, or a 2.5-2-inch risky critter. And I've done that with all of them, and when the bite is tough, it has been the difference. Sometimes you get those fish just tail grabbing on those grubs, and then changing it, cutting it down and running a smaller jig head can really force the fish to have to bite where that hook is, and it can make a big difference. So we'll pull a couple of these packets off the wall, I'll show you the new jig heads, we'll take it over the counter and we'll rig a few up. Alright, so I've got my Bait Junkie plastics here, I've got the 2.5-inch minnow, and I've got the new Bait Junkie heads in the pack here. Really well packaged, really surprising. We haven't actually seen something like this before. It's got the resealable pack, it's nice and thin, you can keep it in there, but it's also got on the front here these little stickers which tell you the ounces, the grams, the size, and the gauge of the hook, how many's in the packet. Now this blue here, that actually indicates the Finesse series or 0x wire, which is what you want if you're mainly targeting bream. Now if you're fishing heavy structure, pylons, racks, that kind of thing, you might want to go for the 2x hook just so you can pull a bit harder, but for most applications, that Finesse wire is going to get you more hookups in the long run. So on the front here, I'll show you straight away, with this sticker, this actually will peel off, just like that. And when you're storing these jig heads, with these new these LSU boxes, the D boxes, they're made perfectly for all the jig heads. There's actually a half size of this coming, which I'm really quite excited for because I don't own this many jig heads. You just pop these on the top here, that'll just stick on, and that way when you have them in there, you know exactly what you got where, and you're not guessing when you're pulling out your jig heads. I'll show you the jig heads inside of the box as well, and it's great that when Daiwa does stuff, they do it properly. That's how we like to do things here as well. You don't do things by half measures, you do it and you go all in. So it's really good to see Daiwa's taken this sort of market and really innovating and bringing good products for everyone to enjoy. So we've got that, and now I'll show you how to rig the plastic. So I've got my Minnow here, 2.5 inch Minnow. Cool thing about the Bait Junkie is they've got this little slit. You might be able to see, we'll get some B-roll of it to cut away, but it's got this little slit which actually gives it a heap more action. You've got the tail kicking, and then you have that midsection of the body which really gives it that really nice big kick of the tail. So when you're rigging a jig head, if you haven't rigged the plastic before with that jig head, you measure it out on your hand there like that, and see the hook's going to come out just in front of that little notch there. So you can actually get the jig head and you can make a little notch and just pull it through, or just remember. And then you come to the front here. I like to find the center point. Now the Bait Junkies are a bit of a softer material, so it can be a little bit tricky. I don't always get it first go, and I rig a lot of these things up, but the good thing about having such a soft material is that you can redo it and retry. So I like to get a finger and a thumb either side of the plastic, and just try and keep it central. Now doing this in one swift motion can actually be beneficial. You roll it around, that'll probably be hard for you to see, and then pop it out the top. And on the top there's almost like a little ridge or a seam, and that's centered in there. So then we get to the hook keeper. Now this hook keeper is a really nice hook keeper. It's got two big prongs, so you're not going to have any issues with your pants being pulled down, unlike Luke, who pulls his down at any opportunity. So we push this up all the way over the top there, and you can feel a pop when you push it, and that's just getting over the front. And then you just give it a bit of a massage and just unstick any little bits that have got caught up, and then you check it. So if we look at it side on, that's pretty straight. It doesn't have to be perfect, but straight is important. And you look down the front there, that's pretty straight. The bigger thing is to check it. Before you fish it, check it. If it's swimming, fantastic. If not, rip it off, start again. You still will be able to pull it off these hook keepers, but a fish is going to have a hard time. Like I'm pulling pretty hard on that, and it's still hanging onto that jig head. So a fish are going to have a really hard time of pulling that off. But yeah, so that's your Bait Junkie heads on your minnows. Going to be a really good head. It's going to be a great jig head for someone who wants one head to do it all. It is a sticky head. I have stuck myself with them. Compared to things like your Gamma, your round 25, round 211s, not quite that sticky, but it's probably ahead of things like your TT. So it sits somewhere in between. I think for someone who wants to do a bit of everything, it's going to be really good. And while I remember looking at it, a cool feature of these jig heads is it actually has like a flat chin, which helps it's designed to help keep the plastic in an erect position, up off the bottom like that. The plastics themselves are buoyant, so that'll help keep this up there in a stable position, and that's giving it a really good spot for the fish to come and grab a hold of it. They've got a really good, there's a really good area for them to get around that hook and find the hook point. So yeah, Bait Junkie jig heads, Bait Junkie plastics, really good for that all year round fishing, but especially if you're fishing those mornings, those deep waters, these will be really good as well. So check them out. Alright guys, so that's it for today's video. If you've been watching these videos and learning a bit, that's fantastic. But if you're still not quite sure, pop into the shop, either here at Beckenham or Osborne Park. We're more than happy to run you through all this gear and more, get you set up properly, answer any questions you have, and get you catching fish. If you want to go a bit further, we also have comps that get run in WA. So there's the WA Classics, there's boats and kayaks. It's very accessible, very easy to get into. There's also the ABT rounds where the guys come across from the East Coast, and it's a pro-am. So you get, if you don't have a boat, you can enter as a non-boater and you get partnered up with someone who really does know what they're doing. It's a great way to learn. It really accelerates that learning curve, and you'll pick up so many tips and tricks that you wouldn't in years of fishing by yourself. So yeah, that's it. Come and see us, TackleWest.com.au. Thanks for watching.
Boom.